ain't going back. Not gonna buy into all that. Hey, hey, ain't gonna hide. Gonna let all the fears slide. Got mother nature on my side. Got a whole lot of loving growing inside.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Coleman from Apocatastasis, an Institute for the Humanities, an alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. In this latest edition of A Conversation With, we speak with Lorenzo, and we're going to talk about his retreat coming up in Florida and the 4 points which they will be looking at, and whether or not we can make the retreat. Those 4 points are valuable principles to instill in our lives. Before I introduce Lorenzo, or reintroduce him, a few words about our dear college. So we do offer in-person and online classes here in Connecticut and via the internet. And you can find out all about that at apocatastasisinstitute.wordpress.com, especially on the academics drop-down, including how to enroll. For our plug in this latest episode of A Conversation With, I bring your attention to the tab History and Mission. And therein, and this tab, by the way, falls under the Start Here tab. In this area, you can see where we're going with this college, what is our raison d'etre, our reason for being, and you can also learn about how we have developed over the last 9+ years. And we have a convenient year-by-year breakdown of things when you go to that website. With that being seen, Chu, a few words about our upcoming episode. Now, some of you will remember, dear Lorenzo, from our talk about 2 years ago in the height of the COVID-19 affair. And we were talking about the New Agora project then. Now, that had originally started off, as we'll discuss in a few moments, as a print publication. When Lorenzo and I were talking, there were movements underway for a type of online marketplace. In our discussion forthcoming, Lorenzo speaks about this retreat of his coming up, the Practical Evolution for Life event in Florida. Now, many of us will not be able to make it. Many of us, even if we could, might not be able to find a place in the inn, as they want to keep numbers deliberately small in order to maintain the intimacy of the event. Nevertheless, the 4 points that Lorenzo and I talk about, those 4 points being intuition, imagination, discipline, and power, those 4 points are necessary aspects to cultivate within each of us to be free and to help our neighbors be free. In particular, Lorenzo and I speak about intuition and discipline, although we could just have as easily spoken about imagination or power, but we did focus on intuition and discipline in particular. What we're after at Apocatastasis, what Lorenzo's after in his new Now work, so the New Agora these days goes by the moniker The New Now, is really to preserve and to encourage that aspect of life that we so often let atrophy in later years, and that is wonder. And Lorenzo has some magnificent memories that we've all experienced to remind us of, whether that's cupping a bee and listening to the bee, or smelling the air after a thunderstorm, or remembering what color the sky was before they turned the sun white and turned the clouds gray without any texture to them, remembering how things were so that we can set the stage for how they will yet be. Remembering that childhood innocence, and let that be adult innocence. Anyway, that's the rundown. Here is the show. Lorenzo, welcome back.
Hello. Hey, John. How's it going?
Good, good. I look forward to getting into this talk about the new now and related works and so forth. But let's see, we haven't spoken in person or in personal simulacrum, at least with Zoom, I think in 2 years or so.
It's been at least a year and a half. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting you mentioned simulacrum because that's kind of a lot of the work that we've done. Some of the new perspectives that I've picked up even over the last few weeks. You know, as you mentioned, we did do print, the new Agora. We do have our website is still newagora.ca. People can see our last 11 years or our 11 years up to 2020. And we did about 80 editions, almost monthly, full color. And it was, you know, elect to govern yourself, which you can see here. I'll show people for a second. You know, that was on all of our covers, and it was basically what it means, you know, as a well, I guess as a studier of linguistics yourself, you know what that means. You know, elect to govern yourself, mind control, government, and elect to do that for yourself instead of having it done to you. And, you know, we did have to, you know, became untenable print in the viral shenanigans about 3 years ago when we were doing print. Too many people freaked out. They closed our warehouse. The guy accused our editor of wanting to kill his grandmother when we just wanted to get into our warehouse in 2020 of, you know, that we paid for. Hey, we just want to get our, you know, our newspapers, our racks, like all of our business hardware, so to speak, was in this warehouse, which it still is right now. The guy's not working there anymore. And he says, what do you mean you want to come in and get your stuff? You know, we're closed for the next 6 months. We don't want you to kill my grandmother, right? So those were his words, not ours. So we said at the time, all right, you know, and the libraries all closed in Canada for a few years where a lot of our publications went to in community centers because we were a free publication. So got to the point we were on the fence for a long time. You know, what can you do to help people when it's costing you, I don't know, it's like $10,000 a month just to print and distribute and do all of those things when they're not really interested in it anymore, right? And so we stopped that, almost quit, you know, and as you said, we've been kind of in a simulacrum over the last few years. Yeah. And, you know, my heart still wanted to help people. You know, my heart didn't want to just, you know, go and do a regular job. And so we had the new now for a while. It is kind of the direction we've taken, as you and I mentioned before we got on. Ahora means now. And it's more of an actual active perspective on changing an agora, which is just a gathering of people, you know, marketplace, meeting place, and doing something with your own two hands and with your own creative potential to make your now new as you would like to see it new.
Great, thank you for that. And if memory serves, and it is rusty, and I need that WD-40 sometimes just to keep things going, but were you in Japan last time we spoke, or in the Orient?
I'm still in Japan, even as we speak, right? Okay. So yes, it's my morning. You can see the sun coming in, land of the rising sun. My wife is Japanese, and when just in January, as literally as the shenanigans started, I was in Vancouver, and I could kind of smell the air, the winds, the craziness that was about to come, right? The lockdowns and all that other garbage. Like Canada went full viral, you know, if I may say, on this Nazi, even worse. And so I was visiting Japan at the time with my wife, and I have a visa since I'm married, and I decided to stay. And I've been here for the last 3.5 years, actually kind of watching things from a distance. So it's been very peaceful. It's been very cathartic, and mostly it's given me a chance to step back and watch what's going on in Canada, Australia, the world, the United States, you know, where you are, and, you know, Japan too, where there's still, even though it's 35 degrees and 90% humidity, still half the people are running around scared with masking. I'm surprised they're not dropping in the streets from not being able to breathe, you know, but seeing the dead looks, well, let's say that, in people's eyes these days has really changed me and allowed me, though, to see an intelligent direction to take the work that I've done since you and I have chatted over the last 1.5, 2 years.
Yeah, this year myself, I've gotten into a little bit of Japanese films. I guess one of the big shots over there in your neck of the woods from the 50s is Kurosawa. Yes, very interesting stuff.
Kurosawa. Yes, I had, you know, when I was a stockbroker originally in my life, my professional life, from 22 to 29. And I had purchased at the time, when I had extra money to throw around, a huge LAN picture, big, huge one. It was on the back of my couch because I love Kurosawa as well. And so it's interesting that you mentioned that. So, you know, I can still vision the blue skies and the red, and I forget the other color of all the horsemen, you know, fighting each other. It might have been red and blue. So It's interesting being here and seeing the difference in how Asian people and North American people view reality, view life, view community, view how they approach each other, how they grow together and not, and also how they view government and rules and regulations, and how they oppose that, or as the case may be with 99.9% of the people in Japan, do not follow along, with the rules and what's imposed from the top down, which has been an interesting, strange perspective on my life and seeing how people view life in a different milieu, we'll say.
So as we imminently get down to brass tacks here, just one final thing as we're warming up here, Lorenzo, from Canada, and you mentioned the winds of change in regard to COVID and so forth. But speaking of winds, we've been beset down here in New England with smoke from your former neck of the woods. What are your thoughts on some of those weather goings on? I know in years leading up to this, it seemed, this is just me speaking, that there were deliberate fires set in Australia. There were like things out of like the Bible, like pillars of fire just like going through things. And it seems this was happening in California too, maybe 2020, 2019. And I've heard whisperings of the same stuff. You just have like all of a sudden all of these fires just starting. What are your thoughts on the matter?
Well, it really takes me, like, I'm just opening up something here. I want to make sure I have this fellow's name right. Our editor about a week or so ago recommended a 3-part chat that a fellow gave at a Sovereign talk, and his name is, hold on a second, but it's on the third hidden religion, Gnosticism, right? He was talking about the regular religions of Christianity, Judaism, Islam, those sorts of things. And he talked about, according to his perspective, the hidden religion that's gone on since time immemorial, that's really affected in James Lindsay, that's his name. And Gnosticism in the modern West was what I was looking at right now, just to make sure I picked it up properly as we're chatting. But the long and short of it is, they're working their magic spell, through the wars, through the fires, as you mentioned, through the even the woke system and the inclusivity and the hate speech and all this other, that anybody with half a brain working and an intelligence going on realizes it's all BS and meant to confuse, the general population, to make a simulacrum of reality through the people to believe what's unbelievable, or what was unbelievable even a few years ago, like boys being girls, we'll say, as just a small way of putting it right now. We don't need to get into that. And to allow that to get inside out, insidious, right? The Ouroboros, he was saying, is their main symbol, like the snake eating its own tail. And so basically starting at the tail or the bottom end, which I'll say is the unsmart end, and again, we'll leave it at that now, but that is, of course, the same as the head. So you're changing people from the inside out and then allowing that to change the whole. So to take your long story short, since I'm going to be visiting the East Coast, where my parents still live in Toronto, over the next couple of months, like I'm going back to Canada for the first time in 3.5, 4 years. I think it's a lot of intentional problems being caused. That's my long to get to the short of what I think of those fires.
Excellent. I happen to be going through a book on the early modern period, the 18th century, and the Enlightenment and things, and a lot of those ideas which we're seeing the fruition of now, the completely isolated individual, which was envisioned in the Enlightenment. This is what you're having now, especially with all this augmented reality and this gender stuff and things. It's literally the fruit of a Gnostical enlightenment that happened so long ago.
Yeah. So according to, what I've seen in the Gnostical enlightenment, as you said, it's a trick. This is what Michael Lindsay says. It's a trick of awareness, in that, like, fake it till you make it, kind of. That's the same with everything. Right. I mean, I've heard, and probably you've heard as well, and, we'll get into the event we're doing, Practical Evolution for Life, which I've been sitting with over the last little while. It's like, how can you teach and share things that you can't teach or share? How can you change anybody? I mean, in some ways, the negative of the positive of, you said, of being isolated, is the fact that, in my opinion, all you can do in this world is change yourself. You can't change anything else. I mean, if you're sitting with yourself, that's you 100%. You don't need any permission. You don't need any even encouragement, tools, in that you don't need any outside source to change yourself. So that's the one non-negotiable, I would say, truth, if you want to call it a truth, in that if there's anything you can change, it would be yourself. Anything outside of yourself, that's always open to debate, whether you can change it or not, or you have an influence or you don't. And, to take that full circle with what we're doing, is it really comes down to personal responsibility, I guess, for your life, for what's going on, and for where you'd like to take yourself, moving forward in your day-to-day.
Yes, and that seems to be what's missing. I meditate on the situation of things, and one of the headwinds that I think you face and I face, and a lot of us who are trying to come on, guys, let's rebuild this sort of thing, is that lack of agency. I just read a great article today from American Affairs, which was a journal I was unfamiliar with until lately, about youth, but they were really talking about the lot of us since the Second World War, and the lack of agency that we have, and the lack of initiative. Maybe that's a better word, the lack of initiative. So tell us a bit, Lorenzo, hopefully desiring to build our initiative and our own comeuppance. Tell us about the Practical Evolution for Life event that you have coming up, and we can really chew the marrow out of this great opportunity.
Sure. Well, I did with a friend of mine, Campbell from Autodidactic, who's going to be coming from Australia. It's funny, I'm going to be traveling from Japan. He's going to be traveling from Australia, and we're going to be in Florida to do this event for 3 days. And we did Freedom's Calling You to Life's Lost Purpose. That was an online 9-video Q&A. We've done live Zooms, and it's still available for people. If they wish to purchase it, they can see it on our website. But it was basically a course where people had a chance to review their life, figure out for themselves, where they are, who they are, how they got there, what they believe, what they allow, what they haven't allowed, and their own perspective on what's missing, where they would like to go, why they haven't gotten there yet, and how they can get there. That's the long and short of it. And, looking it over, we decided, if there was ever an opportunity, Campbell and I mean, from Autodidactic, and decided that we'd like to do a live event, because meeting people face to face and doing this kind of work is really the only way to do it. I mean, doing it this way is great. It's possible in little p possible, I will say, but meeting someone face to face, shaking their hand, feeling their energy, moving with them, seeing their entire bodies, not just their heads, and getting a feeling for who they are, and being able to interact in a live one-to-one, real-time basis, is the only way really to get authentic change into someone's environment, right? Like you said, this whole separation, this whole simulacrum, this is, in my opinion, what's been set up on purpose to keep people away from each other, from community, from agency. I mean, as you said, the whole youth, and I see that here all the time. I mean, I just went downtown the other day, right? I guess I'll segue a little bit sideways, and everyone's just, like it's ridiculous, right? Everyone's got their head in their cell phones, especially the ladies here in Japan. No one's making eye contact. Everyone looks like zombies. There's zero love in people. And even when I came here 10 years ago, Japan was a very polite, friendly, high service place. That's disappeared from 90% of the population. It's gotten very rude here, very brusque, very unloving from people. And I don't know whether it's, the jibby jabs, or what's going on in their eyes, or what's going on in their perspective, or what they're taking in. But, get the youth, as they say. Wasn't that one of the old Nazi sayings, give me the youth and I can control the world? I'm paraphrasing someone or other. But, even though they've told everyone here, don't wear masks, still all the kids, or most of them, are wearing masks, because they made it, essential for 4 years in school. So, imagine if you're 3 or 4 or 5 and you're growing up and you have to wear a mask every day, you become comfortable in that, right? And so even now, when it's hot like this, I still see 80% or 60% of the kids in parks playing, doing whatever, wearing masks on a daily basis. So they're kind of, intruding, let's say, in your consciousness from the inside out, by placing this simulacrum of what they call medicine, but probably isn't, inside people's heads, which is having them hide from themselves. So then if you're hiding from yourself and you're hiding from your community, where are you getting your information for how to be alive? I mean, that's really what it comes down to when you talk about agency. So, coming back to what everyone's doing, either watching this screen or watching their cell phone, you and I could probably guess they're getting their information from an outside source. They're getting their rules and regulations from an outside source. They're getting their news from an outside source. And what most people don't ask, who is that source? What is that source? What's their agenda? Why are they doing it? How are they doing it? What's the reason, and where are they trying to take you? If you look at things from an overall higher view, I think it doesn't take too much intelligence to figure it out, but perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps you have to want to see outside the box. Perhaps you have to get out of, between your two ears and where a lot of people are stuck, and see what's going on in the world, beyond what you're thinking. What nature is telling you, for example, what your heart is telling you, what your guts, what your intuition is telling you. Maybe looking at some past history as you've studied. It's one of the things that attracted me to you in the first place. Looking at some old philosophers, seeing there's been a lot of bad ones out there too, but seeing what some of the good ones have maybe passed along as better ways for you to be alive. Now that's, a long segue into the nuts and bolts of this practical evolution for life that we're doing, and that there's going to be, basically 4 main categories that we're going to look at with people: intuition, imagination, discipline, and power. And if you consider those, if you take them on a small level, people could say what their imagination is. I'm imagining a red car for my life, or my intuition's telling me I'm hungry, or whatever. These are like small ways to look at the biggest of what's possible for life. Once these 4 categories, let's say, once these 4 powers are working for you, it will give you the ability, from what I've seen, to create life any way you wish it to be, which is what practical evolution is. And also comes down to the fact, what I've seen is everyone needs to do this if they really want to do this for themselves, because no one can really move you to a new life or a new way to be without you picking up your own, power, bootstraps, potential, intuition, imagination, and moving yourself forward with your own efforts.
And of those 4 areas, how interesting. So intuition, imagination, discipline, and power. Which do you think, Dr. Lorenzo, needs the most attention as we look at the situation? We see how people behave. I've seen the same decomposition in manners and so forth, so much so that I'm going to be actually teaching about it coming up, in fact.
Oh, interesting. You're doing something on manners.
Manners, yeah. Manners and grammar seem to be 2 things that were taught, and then at a certain point in the mid or late 20th century, people stopped teaching them and just assumed people would pick it up, and neither of them have been picked up. And here we are.
Yeah, it's one of the things, you asked me what's more important, but I'm happy you brought that point up, in that, controlling the definition of words. You and I have chatted about this, right? Or controlling the meaning of words, even changing the meaning of words, like what inclusivity means and what hate speech means, and all of these other, BS terms that don't mean what they're supposed to mean, right? In the sense that diversity, right? Which actually, the powers that be mean to exclude people when they say diversity, right? Instead of diversity just means everything together, right? If you look at the point. So, by learning grammar or even words or even definitions, I've seen it change in dictionaries over the years. From a dictionary I had in 1950 to today, even the words don't mean the same. If you look at discipline as an example, and you pull it up online, it means like teaching your dog to sit, or what they teach you in the army. And that's not the kind of discipline I mean at all. Like, that's discipline from an outside source, basically good boy, bad girl, here's your cookie, here's the whip, here's $5, right? That's the kind of discipline the government tries to teach you, right? If you're good, we'll give you a few dollars. If you're bad, well, maybe you're going to jail, or we're going to take your money away, so you better listen, and why people think that that's a good way to have a democracy is beyond me, because it's obviously, it's also rules by force, right? And rules by threat. And, that is what it is. And it's certainly not a way to be free, right? And that's happening everywhere. And so what that comes down to, as you mentioned, when you asked me which is the most important, manners too. Like, I've noticed in Japan, nobody has, like, I've been bumped into in stores here numerous times, which was unheard of even just a few years ago. So it's interesting, right, to study too. And these aren't by, new, you could say new kids that haven't learned yet. They're having different manners, different ways to be alive. You would expect that almost, but it's been by older people too that have just changed. People that used to have lots of manners, or used to be, and I'm still polite on purpose here, right? And it's interesting that I'll wake people up as they'll be just like zombifying, then I'll be very polite. And then suddenly you almost see a light go on and they'll remember their old habits of being polite and they'll be polite back, or they'll be shocked because, the fact that I'm white here, I'm still quite a bit of a minority in Japan, like 98% of, the people here are still Japanese. So it's allowed me to kind of play my games of playing with manners, or playing with rules, or playing even with a smile. I mean, they had smile lessons here. I mean, I saw that online, teaching people how to smile because they've forgotten, or you'll see people like look very strange. Everyone's got white faces, which is very strange from a culture that tans very easily. Like the Japanese people get tanned so everyone looks like they've got like clown beards. Like you see the ladies now and the men, and I would see them from a distance. I go, why does their face look dirty? And you go, wait, you get close and you just see, the rest of their face is tan, but where they've been wearing masks for, 3 years, it's white. So it's, very, very strange. And what that's brought up by people. So I'm going to say the most important, turning this around would be intuition. Because once your intuition is working, the rest kind of follows suit, because your intuition should tell you when you're getting bad advice, should tell you when something medical is or is not, should tell you when food is good or is not, should tell you how you should be with other people, the politeness or not, should tell you what you're learning, if you're going to school, what's working and what's not. And it should also tell you, again, when it's honest intuition, what you want to do with your life or not, right? And so if once that's working, I think your intuition will lead to a better imagination, will lead to better discipline, because you need discipline even to get your intuition working, and will naturally grow power. And we can talk about that after the fact, because that's the most untenable, and that's the one that comes from what I've seen without thinking. The power that comes from the world, from nature, from a bird whistling at you, let's say, from having everyone's had beautiful experiences in nature. I can remember many years ago when I was watching, strangely enough, in my 20s, I was working for someone that was doing security for movie sets in Toronto, and they were filming some haunted movie from Walt Disney, because there was an old abandoned whatever house, kind of in nature, kind of not in Toronto, and my job was to watch it all night, because I was doing security, which was interesting. I remember falling asleep on the couch and getting in trouble, but that's besides the point. Luckily, that was a long time ago. But I got up in the morning, the sun was coming up, I went outside to do some stretches and some meditation, and then a coyote just came out of the woods and sat and looked at me for a while I was doing my stretches, while I was doing my Jigong kind of stretching that I had studied, and I still do to this day, from Dr. Yang Jwing Ming. Oh, interesting fellow. Yeah. I used to, and I still do his The Inner Art of Tai Chi. And so to me, that still sits with me as something where power comes from, because you start to see, which a lot of people have forgotten, that there's something beyond what's on the screen. There's something beyond what's in a book. There's something beyond what the government is telling you. There's something beyond making money, buying cars, and eventually getting sick and dying. There's a part of the world that gets left behind. And all that can come when you start with intuition. And the trick of intuition, of course, is you have to know yourself intimately first for your intuition to begin working. And that will be one of the key, getting back to our practical evolution for life, discourses, studies, plays. When we're doing that, is allowing people to figure themselves out for themselves, and even then beyond that.
The article I mentioned, which I'll link below along for the audience with all of Lorenzo's links and so forth, from American Affairs concerning young people. I presented on that article earlier today, so it's very fresh in my mind. But one of the things I brought up is, you speak about intuition and kind of getting everything in sync, and then being quiet and realizing there's more going on than the stimulation from the television and the internet. I think that explains some of the types of madness that we're seeing with young people, and again, those young people aren't so young anymore. I don't know when youth ends now, and where childhood ends in this culture, who knows? But the types of madness that we're seeing, and there are all examples we can adduce to that. lot of that coming from never asking, who am I? Never
Mm.
being quiet, and never trying to find those answers.
Well, I have done what the Toltecs have called, and people familiar with the Castaneda books know as a recapitulation, which is a full review of your life, right? Where you, or so I did anyways, you write down everyone you've ever met. Takes a few weeks, but you can do it. It's possible. You review your situation with them. You spend more time with some of the higher emotional relationships you've had, like your parents, your sexual relations. Let's say you've had a huge fight, your best friends, that sort of things. People you've really liked, people you've really hated. And you get a vision and a view and a gut reaction to what's going on in your life, like how you are, why you are, what your beliefs are, what your limitations are, what you imagine for your life. A key part of this work is to remember what you wanted to do when you were young. I mean, when I was 5 or 6, I didn't want to grow up and work for a living. I didn't want to grow up and get a huge loan and chase this and be sick. And I'm paraphrasing what a lot of people are doing. Or to run around here, people work 6 days a week, running and working, and then getting drunk because they need to relax somehow, which of course is not good for your body, et cetera, et cetera. When I was little, I wanted to adventure, I wanted to play, I wanted to go to the stars, I wanted to dream, I wanted to fly. You look at the birds. I wanted to grow even beyond what I can say in words right now. A lot of colors would come to me at the time, a lot of visions, this is what I mean by imagination coming back to you. And I can still remember being 16, 17 and making a conscious choice to change how I was viewing the world, because when you're 17, 18, you want to get laid, you want to make money. I saw friends that went to high school with me with fast cars and suits and all this other stuff, and you want to go to fancy restaurants, you start believing the BS you see on TV. So I still remember making a change, saying, okay, now I have to stop, leave the childhood behind, become an a-hole. I told myself this because a-holes get the ladies, a-holes make the money. I mean, that's what I used to say and see. You got to be ruthless in business, et cetera, et cetera. And I tried that. Like I became a stockbroker for 10 years and it almost killed me, making lots of money. But at the time, near the end, I remember sitting down, my intuition said, keep this up 20 years, you're going to have an ulcer. You're going to be sick. You'll have 3 kids that don't love you. You're going to get cancer, and you'll marry someone that's not there because they love you, maybe for the money or whatever. And, you'll fool yourself into all these situations and it'll be too late. Then you'll be one of these old miserable dudes or dudettes that, really find themselves in the trap. And then you have to believe it, or you have to continue believing it because it's something you've done your whole life and you don't know where to go next, right? You don't know what to do next. So you kind of stay in what's been told to you, as you say, from the TV, from, media, from movies at the time, from TV shows I used to watch, magazines, all this other stuff. And if you look back and you realize it's all been propaganda. It's all been stuff that's been put at you to become a slave, whether it's a slave to money or a slave to your sexual desires, right? Or a slave to the medical establishment, if you like, which a lot of people are right now, or a slave to your fears. This is what I mean by intuition. You take it all back to when you were 5 or 6, you go, oh, okay, none of these things were important to me then. The days seem to last longer. I don't know if you remember when the summers seem to go on forever, right? I remember blue skies every day, and we won't even talk about the color of the skies these days. In September's, I can still recall some of them going, wow, it's been blue skies for 3 weeks in a row. Now, if you get it for 5 minutes, it's a lucky day. So the sun is a different color. I remember it yellow. My wife remembers it's white right now, right? I don't know what's going on, but these are things that I trust because I have a recollection of my imagination and my intuition when I was small. So I can see, I don't have to argue with myself that a lot has changed from the outside in, and none of it for the better. And by better, I mean for the loving, for the healthy, for your benefit as a happy, healthy, let's say community-oriented or family-oriented or even friend-oriented being, whether you're a man or woman, on this plain planet in a way that will help you have a good life. Everyone's being herded into a slave mentality of unhealthy, unfriendly, unhappiness. We won't even talk about the AI BS that's being pushed now. And, I have my theories on that. So the practical steps for our course is basically to give people back their own understanding of themselves so that they can go beyond where they are. If you're happy, that's great, right? But if you want to change something and you need to change, or you need to change by your own admission to yourself that you would like to change, then the course is about allowing people to pick that up for themselves so that they can move forward and do that. And it's 3 days with camping, by the way, as well. It's like all inclusive. And what I mean by, let's say you get down to power, and I don't want to use the word magic, but we'll use the word, if you like, destiny or what have you, is because I was doing these courses, as I mentioned, Freedom's Calling You to Life's Lost Purpose. A fellow from Florida contacted myself and Campbell, said he was interested in taking the course, and he did. And then we had a live Zoom one day when we said, well, usually it's just people taking the course, but for today, anyone listening to us, they can come in for free because we're opening it up. And he came in. And he said, fellows, and he's not a younger man. I think he's in the 60s or 70s. He said, fellows, I have 48 wonderful acres in Florida. He's retired. He's got his fruit forest. This place is like a resort. It's got like a lunchroom for 50 people. It's got a pond. It's got a pool. It's got a barn. It's beautiful. Like, it's literally where the land of, Ponce de Leon went. You've probably studied, right? The Fountain of Youth. And he said, I would like to offer this to you for free to come and have your event here, if you wish to bring people onto our land, onto a way, because I'm interested in meeting you. I'm interested in sharing with this kind of community, and I would like to, pick up for myself what you guys are teaching. And he's a very rich fellow. There's no that he used to work for the Army, developing lasers for Apache helicopters or something in Texas or Florida, or that part of the world. And like I said, if you looked at his house, you're going, it's a resort, right? A huge land, a swimming pool, a pond, 3 barns. But he has said in his generosity with his heart, not asking for anything. In fact, he's helping us put the event together. I would love to see you guys come and do this so that we can offer it in a way and a means that's not so expensive for something that probably would have been, 5, 6, 10 times the cost if it had been done in, let's call it, the real world.
You mentioned the sky. It wasn't good before, but since, we'll say a month ago, when all that smoke come down from Justin Trudeau's land, we have not had, here in Connecticut, we have not had a sunny day, except during July 3rd and 4th. There were some natural clouds in the sky. Other than that, it's been some degree constantly of these bogus mauve clouds they have in the sky. You know what I mean? There's no texture to them, that whole white sun garbage. And they're getting ready. Another gentleman from your present country of Japan has brought this up, and I'm seeing it happen in the press. They're talking more and more about, oh yeah, we are manipulating the weather to save the planet, and it's becoming more public. Go on.
Well, they've been doing it for years.
Of
I
course,
can remember. Yeah, they've been doing it for 30 years.
I've seen stuff from World War II when they were learning about this stuff. So it's not new, but they're going to roll it out. Go on.
Well, I have 2 things. Maybe our conversation will go a little bit beyond the 2 minutes I see on the screen. That's up to you and what you need to do.
Hi, everyone. John Coleman here with a mid-show advertisement. Here at the college, we have many public works. We have open events. We offer elements of the Holy Liturgy during the week. We have works with health and emotional stability, such as our Philology Center. We have our Sappho Center on Literature. But here at Apocatastasis Institute, we specialize in classroom instruction. That is our bread and butter. We are primarily an academic operation. And I would invite you to please consider enrolling in our college. If you click on the tab entitled Academics, you can find out all about how to enroll, as well as things like the divisions of our school into the schools, sub-schools, if you like, of theology, arts, and sciences. You can find out about our staff, testimonials, and such, including, finally, the different levels of enrollment. We have full-time as well as both part-time and even less than part-time enrollment. If you are interested in studying formally, but don't have much time or large blocks of time, we have many, many options for you to consider enrolling. So with that, back to the show. All right, so Lorenzo, at this midpoint, where should we take things in our discussion? We're looking at the event in Florida, your work with the New Now, and the sky, and all these sorts of related topics. So let's take it from wherever you'd like to on part 2 here.
Okay, well, I will take it from the metafictional experience you and I just had. And that what is the difference between living in a simulacrum and living in reality, or living in your own actuality? Right. So, John and I were chatting. Our Zoom meeting was limited, for whatever reason. And then we tried to get back together, and it took us a little bit of time, and we had to take our 10-minute pause, which is fine. But it was beyond our control, right? It was the rules of some system that's handcuffed us to a way of chatting, to a way of being, where, you have this much time, or you have to give us this much money, or you have this rule, and then, oh, we've changed your rules. And then, so the interaction, and I would say it's a loving interaction of evolution that John and I are having here, has been interfered with, right? Something got in the way, something handcuffed us, and something said, wait a minute, you have to, I don't care what you guys want to do, you have to take this pause, no choice. And of course, we have a choice. Our choice is not to interact this way. Our choice is to be face-to-face one day. Our choice is, we mentioned that if we're in the room chatting, the only thing stopping us from continuing or discouraging our conversation or our chat is us, right? It's between John and I. We're talking, we have a feeling, maybe you meet for 10 minutes for coffee, and then it's happened to all of us. 5 hours later, you're still talking with the person. Because something happened, your intuition, and a bird just flew by my window that told you, and we were talking about intuition before, you need to stay here longer, right? You're having a good time. Something is really moving for you, and it's not limited by this outside controlling force, which has become all pervasive right now, which has become all grasping, which is why, in my opinion, the viral shenanigans happened. I don't think it was because of a virus. I don't even believe there was one. I don't think it's because of a jab, whatever that is. We don't need to get into it. I think it's mostly to get everyone out of a face-to-face environment, into a separation. John mentioned this before, where you're by yourself, you're isolated, and then the only option you have to interact with the world is this way. And then if you're interacting with the world this way, then you become chained to a whole bunch of limitations that are in many ways beyond your control, right? They could raise the prices tomorrow, like they've done for suddenly here in Japan. All of the electricity, all of the gas is double price it was last year because of some maybe war somewhere. We're not going to mention that. Is it real? I don't know. I've never been there, right? I've talked to people that are actually from that part of the world that told me their mother's going to the beach every day. So he doesn't know what they're talking about. It's mostly BS. Right. And he's like from that part of the world, besides. So you're going, okay, maybe it's all whatever it is. Like if you're getting your information from an outside source in, or you're getting your information or rules from an outside source in, like how many people, and I've decided to do that, have decided to take it back to the original source, right? Who's giving you this information? Why are they giving you this information? Where is this information come? Who are they? What's their agenda? What are they? Are they human? I've heard all kinds of things. So when you need to take, or when you can take your life, as I say, to a practical way to be alive, really, you've got to take it back to its original source. And that original source for all of us is ourselves. Right. So we talked about the intuition, and what, I know we mentioned chemtrails before, and we can get back into that. But intuition is something I would say that's non-negotiable if you want to have a happy, healthy life, and that you really got to get yours working so that you can see what's real, what's not, and what's good for you and what isn't, without any of the so-called interferences that could be happening from AI, TV, internet, cell phones, what have you.
Yes, know thyself. Know thyself.
Right.
And that lack of knowing is maybe the meta, speaking of meta things, the meta agenda, if you like, that the individual not know himself. And you can see that, forget about all of the bombardments we get from utero and from birth. The way we teach is deliberately broken up to confuse the individual. And the individual will never make connections between different sciences. The land, and this was in the article I referenced, which is down below for the audience from American Affairs, they brought up the introduction of vehicles. And so for the child growing up, their environment, they can't run in 10 miles to the woods over there because they'll be hit by 5 cars on 5 different roads. And so if this, going back 100 years now, has been cutting off and isolating and boxing in, and this is just accelerating here.
That's exactly what is meant by recapitulation, right? If you want to say it in 2 words, it is know thyself. And I had a lot of people tell me, oh, if only we could go back to what it was 10 years ago or 5 years ago. But as you mentioned, people have been taken from farms, to smaller farms, to cities, to this kind of job. And so they've been literally, if you look at things from a big picture, and who knows, maybe it's some long-lived beings, maybe it's some long-lived humans, but as John mentioned, you can see if you study history from a real perspective, our lives have been taken from a larger to a smaller, to a smaller, to a smaller, living on the farm, for example, or then living in the city. And then let's say you're a free range chicken when you could travel, like you're living in a country, but you need a passport. So you can't really go here, or you need a visa. Or if you go visit a place, you can only go for 3 months or 6, and then you have to go home, and people say we were free, but were you really? You really weren't, right? You were like, I equate it, as I said, to being a free range chicken or a chicken in a cage, right? So you were a free range chicken, so it felt good. You could run around as much as you wanted in Canada. You can go to the United States without a passport. I remember when I was little, just driver's license, no problem. Then you need this, and then you need that, and then you need a vaccine, and then you need this, and now they want to put a digital, and then you need, and then the people are saying they're free, but you need to pay with coin or digital currency or paper currency. So were you really? If you really look at the heart of the matter, humanity was never really free, not in my lifetime anyways, and not in past lifetimes. And if you study history, if it's authentic, if it's not, I mean, I've been a student of alternative histories. I've seen there's all kinds of stories of giants. As a small example, we don't need to get into it, in Canada, in the United States, in Japan, the Yamaona, which basically means mountain people, which were all huge, right? And so there's these, China too. So there's these myths of these, and I've seen things in the forest and heard things in the forest of Canada when I used to camp, that I don't need to get into here. But so there's all these myths of things, just to make that long story short, of things we don't know about, we're not sure about, don't get passed along to us. And that's where imagination, the second part of this course that we're going to be sharing comes into. It's like, what can you imagine? Like, even your imagination is limited by your schooling, by your parents, by TV. Like, what can you imagine if you want to be a man? Maybe you imagine you want to be a taller man. Whoops, John's gone. Maybe you imagine you want to be a richer man. Maybe you imagine you want to be a stronger man. Or maybe you can imagine something even beyond that. Right? Maybe you can imagine a life that, you disappeared. Now you're back. Maybe, it's interesting, right? So, he's picking up a book. What is that?
This is my pagan breviary. This is my collection of poetry that I have, and it's not my poems, but although I am working on something. But there's a poem by Rudyard Kipling that I've lately come across, and I've been hot about reciting from time to time, about imagination.
I'd love to hear bits of it, if not all of it.
Kipling, I believe, lived for a stretch in Vermont when he wasn't over in England. But about imagination, asking questions, which we don't do even from our youth, even from our schooling. I keep 6 honest serving men, by Rudyard Kipling. I keep 6 honest servant men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and how and where and who. I send them over land and sea. I send them east and west. But after they have worked for me, I give them all a rest. I let them rest from 9 to 5, for I am busy then, as well as breakfast, lunch, and tea, for they are hungry men. But different folk have different views. I know a person well. She keeps 10 million serving men who get no rest at all. She sends them abroad on her own affairs. From the second she opens her eyes, 1 million house, 2 million wares, and 7 million wise.
I mean, that's amazing. It really is. I would hope maybe you can put that in full underneath this conversation, underneath this chat, if you don't mind.
Yes, I will.
Or at least a link to it. Yeah, that would be great, because my wife is always saying to me, where does this come from, your imagination? Like, what are you doing? What are you thinking? And supposedly, there was a huge castle in France that had no toilets. I forget which one it was. I forget the name, like this huge 10,000 room, what have you, building. So, and so even just that little bit of imagination, like I have a bit of a toilet humor, right? Like, how could they have built this huge building with, this huge architecture, with this beautiful...
Was it Versailles?
I think so. Yeah. The Palace of Versailles. Exactly. And there's no toilets whatsoever. None. So you're going, okay, why is that? You know, why did there used to be buildings where the arches, and I grew up in Toronto where there's like these huge, I never questioned them, you know, these huge arches, these buildings that were obviously not made for people of our stature. These buildings that were not made for people of our, let's say, digestive system, if you like, the ones without toilets. And I'm not going to get into like what's possible, but if you use your imagination, do people use their imagination to imagine a time when you don't need food, let's say, so you're not pooping, so you don't need toilets, when people were bigger, you know? And even if you take that into a small account of the history that's told to us, which is obviously garbage from the onset. I mean, in Japan, they say they opened up Japan in 1850, but then you go to some of the cities and you see these huge architectural buildings that are the same as Washington, D.C., the same as New Zealand, the same as Australia, you know, those huge, you know, arches and bells and domes. And I've seen a few of those in Osaka too, that are supposedly schools right now. And, you know, these huge entrances that are meant for, you know, people of our 3 times our stature, you can tell. So you're going, okay, that alone tells you they've been lying to you about something. Right, even the native people in Canada, you know, all of that history is not true. Slavery, all that, we can go back to, you know, there was people of color in Canada and the United States for thousands of years, right? Some of the natives even kept slaves. Well, you know, whatever. I don't need to get into the specific bottom line in all of this is what's been told to you, what's been shared with you, what's been offered is probably full of shit. There's been an agenda. There's been a reason, as John said, and what's attracted me originally to talking with John was his alternative schooling processes and his businesses, because I knew from a small age that, you know, what was shared with me in school was garbage for the most part. Sure, you can use math and you can read, and, you know, it's good to learn to spell, so to speak, and be good with, you know, your grammar, as he mentioned at the beginning of this chapter, but the rest was garbage. You know, even the social studies, even what's possible. So to take your intuition, to realize, as I've seen, that it's bullshit, and then to use that to inform your imagination. Like maybe for your imagination, you want to fly. Maybe you want to live in a tree. I don't know. Maybe you want to live in a world where you don't need food. I mean, the kind of imagination that gets beyond, like, if you look at a butterfly, how does that happen? Why is it hidden, right? Why does a grub bug that eats lots of leaves get into a cocoon and transform into something with wings in a very short period of time? How is that possible? Science will tell you one thing. I think it's bullshit. I think it's imagination. You know, if you had the will of a mustard seed, as they said, you know, in the Bible, it's like, well, how does a seed become a tree? I don't care what science tells you. To me, I see it as magic. Something so small grows into something so big. You know, they can give you a whole bunch of words to tell you why it's happening. But if you look at it, what is a tree? It's way beyond what we've been told. You know, what is being a bird? Way beyond what we've been told. And that's only what they tell you is part of existence. And I see things almost every day that are beyond what I've seen anywhere else in my life. Sounds in the forest, new birds, new insects, new experiences, new winds. You know, we're going to take it back to one thing where we talked about power and chemtrails. You know, this is an experience that was just yesterday, so I want to share it. So yes, why are they covering the sky? You know, they tell you it's to block the sun, you know, maybe, but why are they blocking the sun? What's going on up there they don't want you to see? You know, maybe that's something to imagine. Maybe there's something going on above our heads, and it's just a matter of putting a veil or a cloud because something's changing up there. And with the chemtrails, you know, you can't see stars almost at all in the city, right? I remember huge skies when I was younger, right? Now, if you see 8 stars at a night, you're very lucky. And that's usually, as John said, mostly covered these days. But getting back to power, let's say in magic, yesterday, for some reason, you know, after I was complaining to myself, you know, about the spraying every day and I can't see the sky and it's not clear, a huge mini typhoon or storm blew through Osaka. It was only about a half an hour. It was crazy windy, crazy blustery. It just came on. The day turned to night. I was in my house here, got dark, and as winds whipped through, these rains whipped through, you know, like it was crazy, like beyond almost anything I've experienced here. But when I went outside after that, the skies were blue. Like I remember as a child, the air smelled alive. The crazy clouds were gone. The things smelled different. The birds were here. So in a moment, everything changed. So for me, that's the other part of the event. And the reason I'm mentioning this is when it comes down to power, you can call it magic if you like. You can call it nature. You can call it God. You can call it Buddha. You can call it something beyond man. But in a moment, something blew through, you know, this crazy city of Osaka in 20 minutes, cleaned everything man was trying to do, like blew all the bullshit, all the pollution, all the chemtrails, all the nonsense. You know, the air smelled more alive. Like I remember, do you remember thunderstorms, how it smelled when you were small? Do you remember the power, the electricity? You know, like I see the smile in John's face, and he reminds me of some of the little boys I used to play with when I was a little boy, because, you know, I still remember a friend of mine when I was in grade school, and he's a funny fellow, and he picked up a bee once, or a bumblebee, put it in his hands, and, you know, maybe I'll leave this chat with this, although John can ask me as many questions as he wants to, and brought it up to me and said, listen, and he brought it to my ear, and I heard a buzzing in his hand. To me, that's what being alive is about. You know, in 1 second, a fellow grabs something that's supposed to hurt you, that's supposed to sting you, that's supposed to cause you something you're supposed to be afraid of, right? Like a bee, oh my goodness, don't touch that, pain coming. And he showed me the magic and the wonder. And supposedly bees can't fly anyways, right? Isn't that what they say in science? They're not built to fly. So how do they fly? You know, so I see the magic and the potential in ourselves, in the world, you know, through the imagination, through our intuition. If you have the discipline, you know, to go there, regardless of what's being told to you from the outside world, you know, we'll talk about that. And then you get to pick up things like power. And by what I mean by power, in a small definition, I would say, is to notice the magic and the wonder of the world beyond what you're told is possible.
Yeah, you want to talk about a word that's been changed. You mentioned dictionaries from days gone by, or at least perceptions. Discipline would have a very negative
Right.
connotation for a lot of people. And, you know, someone had brought this to my attention. I've been chewing over it. You know, they were saying, like, look at that horse out in that wild horse is great, but that wild horse, unless he's disciplined, will never be a racehorse. He'll just dissipate his energies running hither and yon. Unless you, this is a paradox. The same with poetry, the same with harnessing things for electricity, whatever. Or in one's life as the event, and I want to say that properly for everyone. So that's the Practical Evolution for Life event that you can find on Lorenzo's website, linked below. But also soon in the individual's life, you put in these boundaries or whatever to focus, right? If you the river just let to run, you can never generate any, but if you focus it, you get a diamond. If Rudyard Kipling wasn't restricted by the rules of syntax and grammar and rhyming and such, right? It would just be blather and ink on the page. But with the discipline, it becomes a poem that you can read a century later.
Right. And that's a self-discipline, right? Like I said, the one is the horse race. Like you said, discipline is great. Discipline is required. Discipline is needed, right? Discipline by yourself, to yourself, will stop you from eating too much when you want that extra, whatever. Will stop you from being lazy when it's time to do something. When your intuition says, get up, go for a walk. I don't know how many times I hear, oh, you're so tired. And then you go for a walk, and then, you know, 5 hours later, you're not tired anymore, right? So the opposite of what, you know, we're told is true. And so discipline is a good word. Like I said, it's been dirty to me, you know, training a dog or training a horse or training a human, right? Or training a monkey, whatever. Whereas discipline could simply mean, you know, the ability to get beyond your laziness, right? To go beyond, like you said, his discipline to write. You know, so school wasn't bad. It disciplined me in the way that it allowed me to see what I liked and what I didn't like and where I wanted to go and what I didn't. And as you mentioned, this practical evolution for life, if you like, is just a way to remind people, to remind themselves to play, that there's more than you have been taught, that there's more, you know, maybe you've forgotten what you would wanted to do when you were a child, little boy or a little girl, and to see the power and the potential in life way beyond, way beyond even what you can imagine at the moment, because who knows what's possible, right? Why are you alive? Why are you here? Why did you come? I mean, did you come to work and then die? Did you come to suffer and you know, try and make some savings and pay some bills? I mean, everyone has those challenges, but why are you here? Why, you know, why did your parents decide to bring you? And even before that, why did you decide to come? You know, I feel we've all chosen. Some people say we've been tricked to be here. Either is fine, because once you're here, I've seen for myself, you can pick up all the pieces and live a very good life, even through the challenges, even through the pains, even through the medical conditions, you know, even through the limitations, even through the aging process, even through, I think it's all negotiable. But you have to really, as you said, you have to know yourself. And I don't mean 99% know thyself. You really have to know yourself 100% in order to be able to change your life 100%.
As I think about two pieces as we wind things down here, Of course, there's the well-known Peter, Paul, and Mary song about, keeping that magic and sometimes losing that. And that's of course, Puff the Magic Dragon, which has all sorts of colorful
Love that song.
interpretations. But the one right out, just the literal meaning of that is worth the price of admission. And then there's an old Ewan MacColl song, the Scottish singer, The Ballad of Accounting, where the different stanzas ask just that. And that'll be linked below for the audience as well. But what did you do with your day? Did you become a follower? What was the point of it all at the end of the road? And if you don't know thyself, and if you don't take advantage of opportunities like the practical evolution and just the disciplines from our own discussion here, once again, intuition, imagination, discipline, and power, if one doesn't take advantage, you end up at 50 or 60 or 70, and you know what the hell you did with your life. And that's you're gonna see this happen, as it's already happening. People now, they're gonna wake up now 30 years old, and they have just been scrolling for their whole life, and now they go even crazier than they were before.
Yeah, I mean, I like to quote you have at the bottom of your emails: in quietness and confidence, I don't in quietness and in confidence shall be your strength. Right. So those are so important if you really consider what quietness means. And I would say, without thinking, and confidence, to have utmost confidence in yourself. I mean, there's way too much people said, I'd like to do this, but I want to do this, but this would be great, but, the big buts that get in your way. And that's where confidence comes in. Confidence you'll make enough money. Confidence you'll be okay if you need to drop a job. Confidence if you need to change your relationship, that maybe you were in a bad one and something better is coming. As you say, confidence, even if you've gone 30 and you've been stupid your whole life, like I changed everything when I was 30. I was, oh my goodness, I spent 30 years being an idiot. I don't want to do that anymore, right? And so I've spent the next 30 trying to figure out how to not be an idiot. Which is kind of working, in my recapitulation. So I want to spend, another 30 now growing into what is great. Like, I don't want to wind down my life, which a lot of people retire 55 and all that stuff. It's time when power can come to you. I fear and I feel that there's a reason people get tired when they're older, when the wisdom comes to them and suddenly they can't do anything anymore, right? Why they get poisoned, why they get sickened, why they get chemtrailed, why they get fluorided. We can, get into the bad food and the bad energies in the world if you want to. But if you go beyond that and your wisdom and your strength are matching when you get older, right? That's why I feel very lucky that this event that we get to share, and there's only camping space for 30 people. We're not going to have a lot of people there. Maybe we'll open it up to more, but we want to keep it intimate. That, the fountain of youth, it's really interesting that that's where it's being drawn to us, right? Because maybe you can be alive longer than you've been told. Maybe you can stay strong the rest of your days. Maybe you can create and be a powerhouse forever, like an old tree. Maybe you don't have to do what you've been told. Maybe you don't have to become as decrepit as they show you. And when your wisdom matches your power, matches your imagination, matches your intuition. How many people have said, oh, youth is wasted on the young, right? That's only because they're tired when they get their wisdom. Why else would you say that? Because, when I had my vigor and I had my desires and I had my, my endless energy. Well, you don't need to give that up. You don't need to allow that to be taken from you. So you can have it all, but it's not a matter of sitting on your ass and wishing. Really, you need the discipline, self-discipline, to eat well, to be healthy. I don't want to say to exercise, but to keep your active energy active so that more can come to you by your own intent, intuition, discipline, and power, and awareness. That's something we didn't touch base on. That's something I feel that connects intuition and imagination, is being aware of what's going on, being aware of the truth of a politician, let's say, being aware of what's going on in their eye, being aware of the ingredients in your food, even if you like. Being aware of what your job is doing to you and your health or not, and being honest. Honesty, really comes as the core to all of this. And that's something most people have trouble with, being brutally honest with themselves, about themselves and what's going on.
And speaking about being brutally honest, I think it's time for another cup of coffee or another cup of tea whatever you have out there in the morning. It's probably more tea in your neck of the woods, yeah?
Mate right now.
Mate. What's mate? Neither coffee.
Yerba mate. It's a South American drink. I highly recommend it. If you want to, I used to drink a lot of coffee. I guess we'll record this. It made me jittery. Mate has matine. It's from South America. Okay. You can get it anywhere right now. Look it up. and it's good for your skin, I've been told.
Good.
And
Well,
and
we'll
it,
be
and it wa- yeah, and it tastes bitter, but it's good for you, I hear.
good. We'll
And
be
it's
brutally honest and let you get you another mug of mate inside of you there, Lorenzo. So
no problem.
thank you to yourself, Lorenzo, and thank you to the audience for your attention. Please do check out his website down below. The links, as well as to some of the poetry and other references, are also down below. Lorenzo, thanks you so much.
My pleasure. Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me on, John. And, perhaps we'll get a chance to chat again. A lot of new topics came up, which might be nice for us to cover together.
Can't make me lie to my heart. No one tells me where I should start. Freedom first is what I say. Nothing now gonna get in my way. Hey, you can come too. Doesn't matter, you